Alright guys, Scrappy again today. Hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. The OpTic guys respond to how they were able to win the World Championship a couple of weekends ago with one of the most dominant runs that we've actually ever seen at the World Championship, going from being absolutely terrible pretty much the entirety of the season to locking in their practice run before the tournament and becoming the best team in the game by quite some margin. Also talking about the Los Angeles Thieves, not only their preparation for this tournament at the World Championship, but also earlier in the season as well. Huke says that OpTic were preparing for scenarios where they would go down big and need to make a comeback. That came in critical towards the end of this tournament, where a team like Thieves maybe not so well prepared. Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. Thought it was pretty funny to see all the watch parties here that we did on the season, and maybe they kind of did me and Don a little bit dirty. But then there was Abuzah that replies, was like, yeah, no problem, don't mention it, right? Because Abuzah was there all year, and unfortunately for him, didn't quite make the picture in the end. Kremp is racing this weekend, by the way. Just wanted to keep it in mind. It's at the Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. I actually looked this up on the map. It's in Ontario, and it's like outside of Toronto by about the same amount as Kitchener is. When I googled it, it said the track was in Bowmanville, which is like this far outside of Toronto, and I was like, oh my god, here we go again, you know, Kremp's getting in there and he's got to go to the middle of nowhere. The track's actually up here, so it is kind of also in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, that's where Kremp's racing this weekend. We'll get to this right about now as well, because Simple isn't going back to FaZe. So okay, just quick Counter-Strike story. I mentioned for you guys the other day about the financial situation, let's say, within some of these organizations. We know that several times in the recent esports history, in COD esports, players have taken pay cuts after winning the World Championship to stay together. A team like FaZe in 2021, they'll form a great team and they'll win the World Championship, and they'll say, okay, can't really afford to keep these salaries up. We're going to have to knock them down. If you guys want to still play together, that's just how it's going to have to be, and that's how it was. And it's happened many times over the last few years as well, not just for FaZe. Now, FaZe are an interesting team because it's FaZe Clan, but it's also Atlanta Esports Ventures, and effectively Atlanta Esports Ventures, who own the Atlanta FaZe team, they license the FaZe branding from FaZe for a decent sum of money, you know, let's say low to mid 5 figures a month, I think was the talking point that Apex maybe I mentioned a while ago. But there's just been talk about FaZe in general, and yes, it's not quite the same organization, but the same theory still applies, that FaZe right now, okay, they're not bringing Simple back to their CS team, they're bringing Brokey back after the loan situation. I think they probably would want Simple, but it's likely a scenario where they might just wait for his contract to run out and then buy him on a free, which maybe is just good business if that's what they want to do, or get him on a free. You wouldn't have to buy him at that point. Maybe that's good business, but equally, maybe it's a sign of the organization not having the funds that you might expect. Now, as I say, FaZe Clan is different to Atlanta Esports Ventures, but to my understanding, as I said the other day, you know, some of the same kind of theories apply, that it's not like FaZe or even Atlanta Esports Ventures are rolling in bread to give to their players to keep them around if there are serious offers on the table from team like Falcons and elsewhere. So we'll see how that goes. Rencor, 1.24 KD at Champs, remarkably enough, the highest ever KD on a Champs debut. So on CDL history, notably enough, right? Because Simp had a 1.35 on his Champs debut in 2019, which he won, and that is a record which is unlikely, I would say, to ever be touched. But Rencor in the CDL era, for a player's first ever World Championship, that is the best that we have seen at a 1.24. Just a great season for Rencor. I think in many respects he only got better and better. I think Rencor really likeable player too. I do wonder if Heretics could have some interest, right? Like, if I'm a serious contending team in the off-season, I'm at least trying to have a bit of a conversation about that, because Rencor can speak English. He could step into another team. It wouldn't be good for Miami, and maybe Rencor believes, given how good that team was this season at times, that that team can still win. But I think there could be considerations there. Like, there will be teams out there looking for a flex, and maybe they're thinking, well, we could have a combo with Rencor and with Heretics and see if it could happen. Don't think it will necessarily, but something to keep in mind. And certainly that flex role is a big talking point going into next season, because this year, the SMGs, I mean, as they've always kind of been, very important, but the SMGs in terms of numbers were doing a lot of the heavy lifting again this season. The ARs weren't really as strong as they had been before. The aims wasn't as strong as some ARs that we've seen in the past. Simp, for example, had a really difficult season, certainly at the start of the year, and basically the whole year at that. Now, Doug was talking about this on the show the other day, because Simp's been giving a lot of trash talk, hasn't he, right? He was talking trash on various players. He was even talking trash on Huke, right? And Don says that, look, he reminds me a bit of me. He just needs to know when to learn to shut up and not say what's on his mind. And whether Sim's ever going to do that, I don't know, because Sim in the replies actually says, maybe he's right, but I got some ammo in my pocket for that one. So I'd like to see what that looks like from Dante. And I'm hoping that he can have a nice bounce back next season, but I don't know what Cloud9 are going to do. It's Sib right now. Of course, they've still got Spart, who they brought in. They got rid of Mac, they got rid of Attach, and they still have Kremp. So Sib and Kremp have been kind of their best players. They brought in Spart, now they had Capsidal, then they got rid of him, they brought in Gwinn. So just to clarify, the team is Sib, Kremp, Spart, and Gwinn for the World Cup. So that's the team of 4. We'll see how Sib gets on, because of course he's been a big conversation point over the last couple of seasons. There was thoughts about could he join OpTic at some point. That now seems pretty unlikely, because I don't expect that Mercules is going to be going anywhere anytime soon at all. And speaking of Mercules, the OpTic guys came out with their press conference, right? So they sat down roughly a week after the World Championship. I think when they won it before, they were like on the media tour immediately, right? Like they were doing all the podcasts and doing everything, but it seems like after winning it, they were given, a few days of content, enjoy the moment, relax a little bit, and now sit down and have a little chat about what happened over the last few days. They sit down and talk about it. Shotzzy has a good few words to say on the state of the tournament, kind of what it meant to them, meant to him, what it meant to go from 0-18 to where they were at the end of the World Championship, but also some interesting thoughts on were they surprised at the level of their dominance. They turned up to the tournament and were frying. They 3-0'd FaZe in like 45 minutes. They 3-0'd after that as well, got to the finals, and they did face some stiff competition from the Vancouver Surge and eventually got over the line, as we know, in that 5-3 fashion on the rewind hardpoint where they made a major comeback. And I thought what they had to say on this was particularly compelling, because Dashy says he's not surprised how good they were, because they were doing this in scrims. Translating that to reality was a question, and it is kind of crazy to think that leading up to the World Championship, OpTic were like the godlike team in scrims, and nobody knew, like at least in the public domain, nobody knew, because scrims weren't getting streams. There was no talk about it. The only time we heard that OpTic were looking good in practice was when Shotzzy came out in the podcast a few days before Champs and says, yeah, we're frying in scrims. And everyone was like, oh, here we go again. But of course, as we know, it was actually very much true. But I think what's very interesting is their kind of discussion on how this was different to how other teams approached it, because OpTic knew that their practice was going so well that they couldn't expect it to be like that always when they got to land. They were going to face some competition at some point. And as they say, yeah, when you're dominating in hardpoints, you're just sitting in the hill, you're holding every hill. You're not practicing breaking, because you're winning all the gunfights, you're winning all the rotations, you're holding every hardpoint, you're 50-point clubbing teams in scrims. You're not learning what happens when you actually do get punched in the mouth a little bit and what you need to do to respond. And Huke actually says it was a key focus for him to figure out, okay, if we do go down heavy, how do we bring it back? How do we break? And like learning and thinking and practicing for those scenarios was actually part of OpTic's approach. And I think this is really interesting to hear, because in COD there's this general feeling of, oh, well, you just grind and you just keep playing the game and you'll get better. But the idea of really focused practice is clearly critical, and I think that teams are starting to recognize that. But I think OpTic, certainly given their history in recent years, there's a feeling that, okay, maybe they didn't have this next level of thinking about the way to practice for the game as some of the other teams did. The teams bringing in performance coaches, the teams having multiple staff members that are practicing in certain ways. You've got, the ultra guys doing warm-ups with tennis balls and catch and dropping and stuff like that, right? They're doing like yoga or whatever JoeDeceives was doing before the match. Like, there's these other teams that have kind of leveled up in certain ways. But OpTic is saying that maybe in terms of their preparation for the tournament, they actually, in the game itself, were doing things that other teams weren't. And maybe Thieves thought about these type of thoughts, but there was a recognition from OpTic that, okay, at some point in the tournament, we're going to get to a hurdle, and when we do, we've got to be prepared for that.
And if 87-point club wasn't enough, you turn around and 73-point club them. Was this a surprise to you guys at all, this kind of flow that you guys caught through Winners Round 2 and Winners Finals?
No, because we were doing that in scrims for pretty much a month, so it was just, it was honestly inevitable. At least from our perspective, we knew that we were capable of doing that, and every team that, if we played to our best game, then nobody stands a chance, especially in hardpoint. And S&D, that's why we also went really hard in, especially the last couple weeks before champs, because we knew our respawn is damn near flawless, so we just got to make sure that we clean up our map 2s and 5s, and we'll be chilling.
Yeah, no, literally straight up. We replicated literally everything how we played in scrims, like in matches, and honestly, the only biggest thing that was like, it's kind of crazy to say, but like leading up to champs, we were just slamming so hard online to where like, honestly, those the only teams really that like fought was like what LA Thieves and like Seattle at times, but other than that, like everyone we put against would just get ran, and then my biggest thing was like, holy shit, like if we ever play against a team that's actually like fighting. Like how we're gonna adjust, and I feel like that was like the biggest thing that I feel like Seattle was like the only team that was actually able to contest us, and we still fought back and won. So, I mean, yeah, it's lit.
Yeah, I think for me,
Yeah, no bullshit.
it like wasn't a surprise, but it definitely was like a sense of relief because kind of to what Ant said. I mean, we were slamming. Like everything was going well, and to see it actually translate into the matches. Was huge because I mean, we didn't really have any league matches or anything. It was really just scrims, nothing serious. So to see it all translate, yeah, it was pretty nice to watch. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, because we kind of had that problem like in the middle of the year where it was like we were doing it well in scrims, but it wouldn't translate. But we finally got over that, and it actually like executed when we needed to, and was damn near perfect on the hard points at least.
And that is a big thing, like what Ant said, because I feel like Thieves said that happened to them early in the year. They were doing so well in scrims that, like, once they faced some adversity, like, at the tournament, that's where they were like, what do we do? Like, we're never in this position. We're never in the position to break the hill. We're always holding.
That's why I swear to God, losing is learning, bro. I swear to God. That's why I always preach that shit.
Even like mid-map too, like being able to bounce back like down 80 or something like that.
100%. I mean, literally in the rewind, we were down to what, like 90 or some shit?
That was even a big focus, like in practice, at least for me.
Yeah, no, 100%.
So as Karma said earlier in the season, when Thieves were just cooking everyone in practice, they turned up to Dallas, got punched in the throat a bit by Boston, and all of a sudden we're on the back foot. And, I think they're kind of maybe talking Major 2 here, that they were expecting to be really dominant, and then they turned up and it didn't go to plan. All of a sudden, they don't know how to respond. Mentally, they're in a tough spot because their practice has always been front running, right? They smoke everyone off the break and they win the whole map, no questions asked. And they're like, damn, we're cooking, right? No one's going to beat us. But, you run into a scenario on land, something goes wrong, you've got to bounce back from it. And that's honestly the map that OpTic eventually won the tournament on. In hindsight, with what Huke had to say and what the guys had to say there, was so impressive and interesting because they went down heavy on that rewind hard point. It looked like a game 9 was beckoning. They went down pretty heavy, like 70, 80 points. And they started to bring it back, and that was something that they prepared for, that they effectively trained in, that they recognized that there were going to be plenty of maps where they front ran and win dominantly, but they were expecting that maybe a team like Surge, I mean, as, they said actually going into the tournament, the only teams that could really compete with them in scrims were Thieves and Surge, which is pretty interesting to hear that FaZe, they weren't really scrimming FaZe, obviously, but they scrimmed them like one time because they knew they were playing them in the first matchup, and it was not particularly competitive. So I think they probably recognize that, yeah, there's not many teams that can stop us here, but winning a world championship is never easy, and they were prepared for that eventuality. Now, Thieves' scrims leading up to the world championship may not have been as ideal as they were earlier in the season, but even then, were they appropriately prepared for playing Boston in the first rounds? That certainly didn't seem to be the case. So very much enjoyed your thoughts as always on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.
We disrespected you. Sorry, big nose. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, bro, hold on. I actually never read through these. Hold on, let me read through. Hold on, I actually never read through these. Let me see what this guy was saying in here. Hold on. What he said? What the fuck? How you get the golden one? Go fuck yourself. He said, go fuck. No events, L. Big Simp. They got another chance if they lose. They have another chance that they lose because they may lose around 3 and there's 7 spots, but lose around 3. Abe is Hemi, 24 hour. Oh shit. Let's fucking go, Merc. Let's fucking go, baby. Merc. Look at him, dude. Look at him, man. We disrespected you. Sorry, big nose. I know we should have talked to you, Trust. I know. Listen, bro. Listen, bro. Scott Merck is literally already a world champ, bro. This guy's literally the GOAT, bro. This guy's literally the fucking GOAT. Shit's just crazy out here, bro. Shit's just crazy out here. That's AI.